Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Thank you. Those against? Okay, and it's carried. Thank you for that.
Chair. But only landscaping is reserved for later approval. So, to all intents and purposes, it is a full application. The details are there before you, but its official designation is an outline application. In that respect, the wrong condition was placed on the in the draft conditions, and so condition 1 should be replaced with the standard standard outline consent conditions rather than a 5-year consent. Those conditions require the details of landscaping to be submitted before any development is commenced. The second condition would require that to be done within 3 years of any consent being issued. The third condition would require the development to be carried out in accordance with the details that are submitted, and the fourth condition would spell out that it must not be begun any later than the expiration of 5 years from the approval of the outline consent, or 2 years, sorry, from the date of the approval of the last reserve matter. So just to clarify that for everyone. Moving on to some of the other late representations, there are amendments to condition 2, which will actually become now condition 5, but ignore that. Amendment to condition 2, which is to do with the detail of the plan, because we received some amended plans. And there's also amendment to condition 20, which deals with the amount of wood submitted and refers to 72,000 tonnes of dry wood. There are 13 letters of objection received since the report was written. 5 sample letters and emails have been included for members' attention. There are the comments of Alan Cairns MP and the response of the Cabinet member. In respect of that, I'm pointing out the previous appeal decision. And there is also a response, or a couple of responses, from the applicant's agent with regard to comments that have been received from Friends of the Earth. So noting all those, and also finally deleting condition 12, which referred to landscaping on the full consent, which is also obviously covered by the reserve matters. So all of that taken into account. Right, as I've said, this is an outline application. It's an outline application for a renewable energy plant generating electricity from the gasification of waste wood. The plant itself obviously is slightly different from a previously approved plant, which was determined in 2010 by a planning inspector following the refusal of the scheme by this committee. The scheme differs in a number of ways. The first way, and probably the most visual way, is that the flue which is associated with the facility rises from 20 metres to 43 metres, and is now, instead of 1.5 metres wide, 2.7 metres wide. So it is a considerably larger flue attached to this development. The other key change is that the building within which the turbine, which burns the gas generated by the gasification of the wood, is situated, is some 23 metres high, where the previous building was up to 15 metres high. The remainder of the buildings on the site are actually lower than the previously approved building, ranging from 9 metres to 11 metres in height. The key issue for members is that this plant is, to all intents and purposes, almost exactly the same process as was previously granted by the inspector. It is a plant to generate electricity. It will generate 10 megawatts of electricity as opposed to 9 megawatts as was proposed by the previous scheme. It proposes to burn the same amount of dry wood, 72,000 tonnes of dry wood. It is a scheme which we've actually received a letter on today from the Welsh Government. Welsh Government have clarified, because there was some debate about whether it would be a waste-based operation, removing waste from the waste hierarchy, or whether it should be considered as a power generation application. And Welsh Government have clarified that matter with a letter today, where they say that it is definitely within Schedule 2 of the EIA regulations, and as such should be treated as an electricity generation proposal. They will further go on to say that they've considered whether it needs to be subject to an environmental impact assessment, and they've stated that in their view it does not need an environmental impact assessment. So they've clarified that at about 4:30 today. Obviously, we wouldn't normally have brought that as a late representation, but it's so fundamental to the consideration of this application. I think it is important that members are aware of that.
Could you say who the letter's addressed to?
The letter actually was addressed to Barry and Vale Friends of the Earth, but as a council where the application is situated, I assume from that Barry and Vale Friends of the Earth applied for the application to be called in on the basis of the lack of an environmental impact assessment. So they've obviously clarified that matter. So moving on, I think what members need to be aware of is that the...
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Goldsworthy, but apparently Friends of the Earth haven't received that letter at the moment. And also, I was under the impression that we really weren't supposed to receive late representations after the cut-off date. Now, you did indicate that was a fundamental bit of evidence, which it sounds important, but no, apart from the chair, apparently, no one else has been able to absorb that or see the actual letter. So I feel that I'm at a considerable disadvantage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a matter obviously of law, so it has to be brought before committee members. If committee members are to make a decision without this letter, they could be in a very serious position in terms of judicial review. The letter is addressed to Friends of the Earth, but has been copied to us as a council by Welsh Government. If Friends of the Earth haven't received it from Welsh Government, I suggest they take that up with Welsh Government, not with the council. It's not a matter for the council. We did not make an application for it to be called in for an assessment of whether an environmental impact assessment is necessary. Obviously, that was something Friends of the Earth did, and Welsh Government should have responded to them, I'm sure, but I've got no comment to make on that. We received this at the last minute. It is important that members are aware of it. The letter can be circulated around all members now, if you so wish, and I will pass it around. It is not a late representation. It is an important clarification from Welsh Government on the decision it is taken as to whether an environmental impact assessment is necessary. I think it is very, very important members are aware of that. If they weren't aware of it, then any decision they made could be prejudiced by virtue of it.
Okay. Would you like to continue?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, only to add that members really need to, I'm sure they have done, have read the previous appeal decision on this application. The inspector, in dealing with that appeal, made a number of very, very important comments and decisions, and obviously set out how the Planning Inspectorate and consequently the Welsh Government would determine an application of this nature in the future. And I think the key elements of that relate to a number of factors which were referred to in the previous refusal from this committee. The first being in relation to traffic and traffic generation. Clearly that was dismissed by the inspector on the previous application, and obviously as this involves the same amount of wood generating slightly more electricity, it is clear that it would be very difficult to withstand any suggested reason for refusal based around traffic. The inspector, in considering the previous appeal, made it clear that he considered traffic entering a working dock is not a material reason to refuse a planning application. The second issue is in relation to the appearance of the plant, and clearly it has to be recognised that the plant itself is different to what was the subject of the previous appeal. However, the inspector was very, very clear in the comments that he made on the previous appeal, and I will just read out what his comments were in respect to the appearance of the area. Bear with me one second. it is extremely important because the inspector was considering whether the appearance of the plant as it stood within the docks was harmful on the appearance of the area. And what he said was, bear with me 1 second. The local residents may wish otherwise, but the site lies in an industrial area. The council conceded at the inquiry that it had no objection to the appearance of the proposed building. Looking down from Dockview Road, the new building would be seen in the context of the development within the docks, and in my view would sit comfortably within its industrial surroundings. He then goes on to say, it was argued that the site may be designated for industrial use in the emerging local development plan. However, the plan was not sufficiently advanced to be material consideration in this appeal. Lawful use is general industrial use as set out in Class B2 of the Town and Country Planning Use Classes Order. So he was quite clearly setting out that he felt it was an industrial area where the appearance of the plant was such that it would not be unacceptable. The key factor we have here is that this is clearly a large plant. It is an industrial looking building with a chimney upon it. The fact of the matter is that it is set against a very industrial backdrop with a number of chimneys there. We have looked at similar height chimneys just to get an idea, and similar height buildings just to see exactly what heights are around this site, just to give members an idea of what obviously the appearance of a 43-metre high chimney would be. And you will be aware that the large chimneys in Dow Corning, the twin chimneys, the very thick chimneys you can see from throughout Barry, those are actually 83 metres high. So this chimney is a little over half the height of those and considerably slimmer. The docks office is 30 metres high. The Docks View Road is 31 metres at the point where we stood today to view the site. Is 31 metres above datum level, so the level of the dock. And the former, unfortunately it's gone now, so it's not a great visuals point, but the former Rank Hovis building was at the very top of the telephone area, which was sited on top of it, 39 metres high. So those give you a flavour of the height of the chimney that is proposed as part of this scheme. A couple of other just key issues for members which have been raised as concerns by local residents. Obviously, there is the issue of emissions that come out of that chimney, which we've just been talking about. As has been mentioned by the chairman, emissions and the licensing of the site as a whole is done by Natural Resources Wales under the Environmental Protection Act, and they will, these developers would, if they got planning permission, would be required to apply separately for a license to operate the plant, and as part of that license they would be required to prove that what came out of the chimney was not harmful to human or animal or ecology. They have submitted an air quality assessment as part of the application, and that air quality assessment has been considered by both our environmental health colleagues and by Natural Resources Wales. Natural Resources Wales have confirmed that the air quality assessment has adequately assessed the potential impacts of the above on sensitive habitats. Our advice is the proposed development is not likely to have significant effects on habitats. We therefore remove our objection. So they have no objection to the scheme. They did originally raise a holding objection because they felt that the air quality assessment that was originally submitted didn't answer enough questions. A new air quality assessment was submitted by the applicants, and that has been accepted by Natural Resources Wales as acceptable, and they would be our advisors in that regard. So in respect of pollution, we have to be completely within the hands of Natural Resources Wales. The other key issue which has been raised by a number of residents is in respect of ash and the generation of possibly toxic ash from the plant itself. And it is key to note there are two forms of ash that are generated by this proposal. One is a heavier form of ash which is used already in the construction industry and is recycled and made into blocks and used in hardcore. And that ash would be generated by this plant in a larger quantity. But there is also what's known as fly ash, which is recognised as a toxic substance. It is considered to be toxic. and that would still be generated by this plant, but would be taken away from the plant in sealed lorries, and would in fact be the type of lorries you see leaving the Aberthaw power station now, the large cement lorries. Those are the same lorries that would leave carrying that fly ash. It would be taken to a facility for landfill. That system is all sealed. It isn't open to the air. There are 2 large silos proposed to hold both forms of ash, and those silos will be emptied by these sealed tanker lorries and taken away from the site. The question, I think, was asked on site about how we would, how do we know it's sealed and how would the ash get there? And we've been advised that the ash would be basically pumped along pipes to the scheme, but there is a condition proposed which would require full details of the ash transferal system and the removal of the ash from the site, and a management plan for that to be submitted. So that would be covered by that condition. I think I've covered most areas now, so basically
We'll throw it open to members. Oh, right, we've got some, yeah. Yeah. Do we take the local member first? No. Okay. Yeah, so we've got some speakers now. So against is Mr. Max Wallace. If he'd like to take a seat on the top. Max Wallace. Okay, you because you're the only speaker against the proposal, you're allowed 6 minutes. Okay, thank you. Huh. Yeah. 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 Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, if you'd like to kick off when you're ready, your 6 minutes start now.
Thank you, Chair. Concerns about ill health linked to incinerators, that's especially newborn babies, refuse to go away. In 2012, we had a government review under the Health Protection Agency and was expected to report within a year. 2012 it was. Now, interim reports are just coming out and they say it's uncertain, but there appears to be positive association with broad classes of congenital malformations to incinerators. Final results were due in 2013, and now they're to come next year. So I say the concern about ill health links does have some basis, and the government report which was revising present policy is still to come out. And what's suspected is the nanoparticles from incinerators, because they have highly reactive toxic metals on their surfaces. And the air quality limits which the NRW apply do not cover the nanoparticles. So whatever assurances the authorities give, public perceptions are clear. Waste incinerators are bad news. We've heard about the huge 145-foot chimney, the complex buildings, industrial complex, like the chemicals factory. So you cannot dismiss, as officers do, as having no effect on neighbouring development on the waterfront. There's a question of need for the plant. Sunrise say waste wood must be diverted out of landfill. And the government said this several years ago, but they're just repeating that. But in 2012, the government reassessed this and found the chipboard companies have all set up recycling systems, and they're reusing the waste wood in new chipboard and contiboard. 2/3 of waste wood actually goes there, and they want more of it, claiming of competition from incinerators. The market assessment, which the government has done, found there's too little to feed all wood chip incinerator projects if they were built. That was in 2012. they've only got, there's only enough wood chip for about 25% of the capacity. That's presumably why Sunrise didn't go ahead. Now in South Wales, there's a new plant at Margam, and that's signed up Stobart's, the major chip supplier, in January, and they signed them up for 250,000 tonnes a year, which will take all South Wales waste wood and much more. So there's no problem, no surplus. Sunrise have been upstaged after doing nothing on the Barry permit for 5 years, and any recoverable waste from wood, or wood waste, is now spoken for. Now you've got to look at waste planning reasons against. This is using waste wood until waste wood is burnt, converted, or whatever, it is waste. And it will be supplied as waste chips, waste wood chips, under the waste legislation to any new plant. This new plant has very low efficiency, under 20% on the manufacturer's figures. It's designed to maximise electricity and waste all the surplus heat. There's no condenser system, as there would be in efficient central heating boilers you have. It all goes up the chimney with a very high temperature plume, 138 degrees centigrade. Very wet plume, 15% moisture, and it will condense into clouds as the plume cools below, as it recedes from the stack. There's so much moisture in it, they have to just trying to get rid of the moisture and the heat by pushing it up the chimney. Waste planning policy actually says you should be maximising the heat use, and where possible you should use combined heat and power, CHP. And commonly they design these plants as CHP ready. This is like the Viridor plant in Cardiff. But the present design excludes all future use of the heat. Doesn't even make it CHP ready. They have a waste planning statement. Sunrise gave one out in June, middle of June, because they have to do it under Welsh planning law. It's defective. It doesn't give the specified things that's required in it. It doesn't give the source of waste wood. It doesn't give the destination of ash. They claim elsewhere they're going to use some grades A, B and C of wood chips, but that's not included in the waste planning statement. Likewise, this claim the ash will be used to make building blocks. Unlike Marcus Goldsworthy, who says this is normally used, there isn't any use of wood waste ash for building blocks, because it's a mixture of the metal nails and so on, and some very fine ash. It's just not like other incinerator ash. There are contradictions with the application form. The source of the waste, it says, is only construction, demolition and excavation in the application form.
Can I remind you, you've got 30 seconds.
30 seconds, thank you. So the municipal waste, the industrial commercial waste that we would like it to be used, they would expect to use, doesn't apply. Aberthaw, let's compare with Aberthaw, where they co-fire wood with the coal. Efficiency is 37%, electricity, Welsh Forest residues. Sunrise efficiency is about half that. You don't want Sunrise to undercut Aberthaw. So I'd conclude that...
Can you wind it up?
If you're minded to throw out this application, the officer's report does not give you a good basis to fight any appeal. So do defer it today, asking for a new report giving good planning reasons for rejecting the application.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Okay, it's open to members to ask Mr. Wallace any questions they would like to ask him as a result of what he's said to us. Okay, John Drysdale.
Thank you. From memory now, from reading the figure of 20% efficiency that you quoted, I have a memory that it says if you exclude the usage of energy on the site itself, is that correct? And if it is, do you not think that actually that's a misleading efficiency figure? Because they're generating useful energy from the burning of the wood. They happen to be using it on the site rather than transferring it to the grid, but it's still useful energy.
If you Yeah, if we compare it with Aberthaw, this is taken into account. Aberthaw uses electricity in their own plant for generating. So you look at what's going into a plant, the energy content of the wood chip going in for Aberthaw or for this one, and you look at the energy content that's going out. They don't get any government subsidy rocks for the energy that's used up in the plant. Normally inefficient plants that use a lot of electricity internally, they just get penalised. That's their problem. You look at the boundaries, and so it's not misleading. It's actually the thing, the quantity that's generally used to describe the efficiency of a power plant.
Yes? He'll have to turn his microphone off. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, your point about the efficiency and it's their problem brings me to another point, and that's to understand what the actual scope of planning decisions are. And you mentioned about questions of supply and whether there would be enough waste wood around, given that there are demand from Conti board manufacturers, etc. You also mentioned the disposal of the ash is not stated in the application. There's no requirement to do that, and actually they aren't planning matters, so they aren't grounds on which we could make a refusal of this application. So is that your understanding of those are the limitations of the planning process?
No, I think this is misunderstanding. The present planning law has access and design and access statements in ordinary planning law, and for waste projects it also has waste planning statements, and both are necessary. The waste planning statement was put in very late because they had to formally. They were told to, presumably. It was put in very late, but it's still there and has to be treated on the same. It has the same status and has to be treated on the same basis. And it has to describe. It's prescribed in the legislation. It has to prescribe the sources of the wood, what different sources are going to be used, and that's not there. And it has to describe where the wastes are going to go. And the ash, it doesn't say where the ash is going to go, although it's given, and Marcus Goldsworthy repeats it, that it's going to be used in the construction industry. There is no evidence. It's not used anywhere else like that because it's a nasty product with all bits of nails and so on. It has to be treated before that, and there is no treatment facilities set up. Or they're not planning to set up, and there are no treatment facilities available in the UK. So where the ash goes is and where your waste goes is an essential part of planning law. You have to say, and particularly if you produce hazardous waste, that is part of the issue. You have to satisfy legislation at the proximity principle and dispose of your waste locally within the South East Wales region, and they cannot do that. If it was like Viridor also found they couldn't do that, and the planning committee objected to it on those grounds. And Viridor has now got a process going on which they can use their fly ash into blocks. But that's a special process they've set up. So they are doing it for the Viridor incinerator, and it should be done for any other incinerator.
Yeah.
Can I then ask Marcus what his view would be about the committee's capability in terms of phrasing?
I know Marcus is itching to get in, but we do have a process to go through.
Okay.
And Marcus can respond to that.
Come back to that.
Because what Mr. Wallace has said is irrelevant to this planning application. So, but I'll let others decide that. I know that Councillor Jeff James had his hand up, and Councillor Williams, so I'll take Jeff James first.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Wallace, you draw comparisons between this application and the Aberthaw Power Station. But would you accept that the Aberthaw Power Station burns 96% of its product is coal, which has got a much higher calorific value than wood, and therefore, by definition, it would be more efficient? And if you're arguing that that this plant ought to be more efficient. I don't think any of us would want to see coal being burnt at this plant, so I think that's to be accepted. So it's chalk and cheese, the two things that you're talking about.
No, Jeff, I'm sorry. The calorific value is the way it is measured. Though coal has higher calorific value, of course, than wood, it's the calorific value in that matters, the total calorific value, not the tonnage, but the calorific value, the total going in. And the efficiency depends on the high temperature turbines, and the efficient turbines they have at Aberthaw, the big ones. And it's good engineering, whereas this one is just a small plant, inefficient partly because of scale, but also partly because of the technology. If you can burn your chips at Aberthaw with twice the efficiency, and the wood chips are going at twice the efficiency, the same as the coal, calorific, per calorific value, then it's much more efficient than to burn your wood there than it is just to burn it in this kind of incinerator. They want the same. They're applying for clean wood chips, you know, waste wood from the Forestry Commission, just the same. That's what they've got partly in the specification. It's just the same as what Aberthaw takes. So they would be competing with Aberthaw, and the difference we point out is Sunrise will get subsidy. For some reason, they get subsidy from our electricity bills because it's called a renewable energy, whereas Aberthaw, who's doing it again for renewable energy purposes, doesn't get the subsidy.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Max. A couple of the things here. You mentioned the height of the chimney. That's not always relevant because you can put cyclones in and you could put filters in, like they did at the Heath Hospital there. But I'm asking you there because I sympathise with what you're trying to do here. When you get projections of what's going to go through that chimney, that's fine to start. But there's no regularisation then on what's happening as a future. So that depending on the different types of wood there, you're going to have, a variance in that. So if they're getting around the legislation in the beginning, based on a certain set of facts, it's almost impossible to keep to those facts because, as you rightly know, the wood that's coming in there is going to be differing there. And the other thing there is that I'm not so concerned about what comes out of the chimney because you've got the Clean Air Act and you've got all the provisions that are there. But what would concern me is all that dust that's there, if this is now going to be handled to make blocks, etc., this is, unless this is in an enclosed area, this is going to cause pollution there. And I know we're covered under the Clean Air Act 71, but is that one of your main concerns, the dust part of it?
Turn your mic off.
Oh, sorry, yeah, mate.
The dust as such in the ash, there may be some handling, and well, there is some handling of the bottom ash. The fly ash is going to be put into these silos, which is presumably well controlled normally. There could be if there was an incident like a fire, of course, then that's liable to come out. But the bottom ash is normally going to be handled well, just scooped up in some way, and there will have normal restrictions on ash from the plant. Now you can be worried that the ash is shown to be the particles of dust from fly ash, the particles of dust from great ash are shown to be like 10 times worse in toxicity than ordinary dust from roads and so on. So there is some worry about that, and that applies to the Viridor incinerator ash going on Lambie Way too. So there are some concerns about the toxicity of this particular ash, but it's not going to be made into blocks on the site. There's not the space. It would have to go to some other plant to do that. It would have to be filtered from the metal, the bits of metal in it as well, and treated in some way. So it's not ready to be used until it's processed, and you have to find a processor. So, but there is also some dust which comes out of the stack, because the smallest particles of dust, whatever filters you put in, the nanoparticles come through the stack and come out just like the gases. They come through any filters, and it's those nanoparticles which is the main concern, because then they will deposit over the wider areas of Barry, particularly in a wet plume, because they tend to get water condensing on them and to drop out. So any misty conditions, they will tend to come down in the town, and those are the ones that are suspected of causing ill health, you know, and the malformations in newborn babies. So it's that problem. It's not only malformations; it's also heart things and so on. But it's that problem of those dust particles which are coming out of the stack, which are really going to affect the people of Barry.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Nick Hodges. Can you turn your mic off? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to ask a very selfish question. Not selfish for me, although I am a resident of Barry, but selfish for the Vale of Glamorgan Council. I'm going to ask your opinion on something, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's a question about the bottom ash. My understanding is, and I seem to remember this through the years, that bottom ash potentially can add to our recycling percentages. I understand that's right. But you've expressed concern about the suitability of the ash being used for anything. And if there's no business, I'm just wondering if you think we will actually lose out not only on the gain of using bottom ash, but also be penalised by then having extra rubbish to dispose of. I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts or comments on that.
No, I know.
My understanding is that the recycling classification for ash only applies to municipal waste that's combusted, and that's what Cardiff is trying to apply, and through the Project Growth, to get that classified as extra, adding to your recycling, the council's recycling amounts to meet the target. But for commercial waste, industrial waste, this is what this will be. This is quite outside the recycling target. But there will be a need to get rid of the stuff. You can't pretend that it's going to be used in blocks. That's not shown to be a process that's economic or anything. Sunrise say they're not going to use the heat because it's not economic to put in heat pipes. In the same way, they'll say, well, we can't use this, it's not economic to build a plant to process it, and so it will be dumped somewhere. So that's going to add to the landfill. It's not the council's amount in the landfill, but it is putting an extra burden on the landfill, and you haven't made allocation in the LDP for any landfill sites within the Vale of Glamorgan. And I understand, you know, within the wider area, there's no...
Yeah. I do have some concerns about the way the questions are being posed to Max Wallace. He's not an expert. He has a general knowledge, as Friends of the Earth generally do. There are experts here, and if you want to put those to them...
I will later, Chairman.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that are
but
qualified
I've taken
to do
the
so.
advantage of having someone who's come to address us,
Yes.
and I've asked his opinion.
Right,
And
it
I
is
will
his
ask the
opinion.
same
It's not
question
an
and the same
expert opinion. That's what I'm
of
saying.
any expert that you throw at me,
Yeah.
Chairman.
Okay.
So it's potentially no gain or loss if no business can be found for this bottom ash in terms of council liability.
What does he know about the council?
I don't know,
liability?
Chairman. That's why I'm asking him.
Yeah, well, he's not a member of the council. It would be better if an officer was asked that question.
Well, sorry, Chairman, when I brought in public speaking rights, I thought I'd be asked to talk to the public.
The public are not giving you an expert answer because they're not experts in it, but you do have planning officers here who are experts in it. Thank you. Is there any other member who would like to ask Max Wallace a question before I ask him to step down? Yeah. Yeah, it will be forthcoming, yeah. Okay then, thanks Mr Wallace. You can step down. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, it's for local members now who want to speak that are not part of the planning committee, but welcome to speak. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It will come as no surprise to any member of the committee that I am supporting my constituents who have raised very genuine concerns about this application. I honestly believe that their voices have the right to be heard. My focus will be on the impact of the plant to Barry, if approved, and you've already heard from Mr Wallace, and I won't repeat any of the views from Friends of the Earth. I understand without question the history of this site, and I am aware of the previous decision by the planning inspector and the conditions he placed on a previous application for this site. Clearly, I have not had sight until this evening of the letter from Welsh Government, nor had I heard the initial response from the operational manager for planning. But nevertheless, I will continue and read out my statement because I believe these are real considerations that should be heard, although admittedly I appreciate one now on advice from Welsh Government probably is incorrect. Despite the conditions for the previous application, that approved application is indeed now spent, and this application is for a larger stack, some 23 metres higher than the previous application, a physically larger plant in my opinion, and the energy output is more. Therefore, I would argue that this is a very different application to the one the inspector heard over 5 years ago. I form my conclusion for the following reasons. The position of regeneration in Barry has now changed considerably. Firstly, on the planning application for the regeneration of Barry waterfront, I am aware in paragraphs 10 and 11 of the inspector's report, which states that the council is processing an outline application. That application has now been approved for housing at East Quay and a large area of green space at the border of Woodham Road. Clearly, that is a different position to 2010 and could, in my view, have an impact on any future appeal. The inspector further states that organisations linked to the regeneration of Barry waterfront, and I quote, express no concerns regarding the impact. This has now changed. A formal objection has been made by the Barry Water Community Activity Centre trustees, requesting that this committee uphold their original objections from 2009 due to their concerns of an environmental hazard, restricting our clients' use of the water, and clean air sailing. Clearly, 5 years on from the inspector's original decision, progress in regenerating the dock and indeed using the water has changed. Finally, in relation to regeneration in Barry, in the last 3 years, significant progress has been made in this area generally, from investment in Barry Island, building the second island road early, the redevelopment of the pump house, and indeed that housing, a school, other community services have either now been approved or indeed have started their construction. This should be a practical consideration for the committee, because since the inspector's decision, the situation has changed. The final comment I will make, or like to make, in addressing the committee relates again to the inspector's decision, as this appears to be a significant reason for the acceptance of this application. Within his report, paragraph 9 makes reference to then LDP not being sufficiently advanced to be a material consideration in this appeal. Again, I would argue this has now changed significantly. Within the LDP, which is currently being considered by the inspector, policy SP8, sustainable waste management, states that the operational port of Barry is a location for in-building waste management. I still maintain that's what this is. However, it is also clearly states that these areas should only be approved for sustainable waste management facilities where they do not conflict with any existing or proposed neighbouring uses. I believe, as do residents, this application would indeed conflict with the existing approved applications for housing, leisure, tourism and retail developments now approved in Barry waterfront as nearby as the border of Woodham Road. I hope the committee will give real consideration to the views of my constituents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Right. I've got 2 speakers for the motion, so would you like to come up and take your seats and then introduce yourselves? Yeah. It's off.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Douglas Wardle. I am a lawyer, and this is my colleague Richard Frierson, who is a qualified engineer, in fact a power engineer with some 35 years experience, who can probably set straight the facts from one of the earlier speakers. Would you like me to continue now?
Yes, please. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll start the clock now.
That's thanks. What I'd like to do is to concentrate really on the benefits here. As you've heard, we are proposing a 10 megawatt power plant That 10 megawatt power plant will provide sufficient power to provide electricity for about 52,000 people. That is the population of Barry. I'm sure that some of the councillors here will represent wards where there have been power cuts and blackouts during the past year. Having this power plant here in Barry will dramatically improve the system stability, the availability of power for the benefit of the population as a large. I know that there have been 100 people who put in letters of objection to this. I don't know how representative they are of the 51,000 people here in Barry, and I'll leave that to the committee to form a conclusion. The second benefit I'd like to flag up is that during construction we will be expecting more than 100 jobs. That will include some locally based project consultants and contractors. During operations, that will be a 15-person full-time staffing at the plant, and then spin-off jobs to do with operations and maintenance and feedstock management. Thirdly, we expect during the lifetime of the project that revenues for the community, for the Vale of Glamorgan, will exceed £20 million. And of course, as has been discussed earlier, it does contribute to the regeneration of the eastern part of the Barry docks. So when you're considering this application, those are the benefits, I would say the principal benefits, and you have to balance that against the visual impact of the stack and the change in the shape of the buildings, because everything else really is substantially the same as went before. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. You finished before time, but that's fine. We'll go on to the next speaker, unless any member wants to ask Mr. Wardle any questions. Yes. Or would you prefer it when? Yeah, I can take it together. Would you like to speak and then?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm principally here to support Douglas from a technical aspect because I've been involved in in this application at a technical level as a development partner. So really, I think my main purpose is to answer the questions that the councillors might have concerning technical aspects. But I would like to pick up on some points that were raised earlier about efficiency, etc. It was quoted 36% efficiency at Aberthorpe Power Station. I know Aberthorpe Power Station quite well, having worked there on having significant contracts to maintain and operate the place. Drax is the equivalent efficiency. There are various efficiencies in a power station. There's a gross plant efficiency, there's a net efficiency, but the efficiency that was quoted of 36% is a pretty standard efficiency for that size of and generation of power plant. It's that level because now the equivalent efficiency of our plant is 27%, not below 20, as was pointed out earlier. So 36 plays 27, and the reason that Aberthorpe can afford, or when it was designed and built, could afford to have that level of technology incorporated into it is because the economies of scale are much greater on a coal-fired power station with a much more higher calorific value fuel. So it's a much more the economic proposition than waste wood, the combustion of waste wood, basically. And that's why they can afford the technology that gets them the 36%, and it just wouldn't be economically viable for us to consider that level of efficiency in our process. So that answers that. Remember that 36% plays 27, not less than 20. There was some incorrect statements made about the ash produced by the plant. There are two types of ash that's produced by the plant. There is hazardous ash, which is the very small particles towards the back end of the process, and there is quite a large proportion of non-hazard. 30 seconds. Non-hazardous ash. basically there is no equivalent of an incinerator's bottom ash in this process. The bottom ash that would have come out of an incinerator in our process is recirculated in a fluidized bed and gets converted in that primary combustion process into much smaller particles and is collected in a sealed way later on in the process, as is the hazardous ash.
Okay.
The reason the hazardous ash is hazardous is because we've put the process, in order to clean the flue gas up and provide the air quality that everybody's looking for and will meet the permit requirements, we have to inject chemicals into the gas stream which help to collect those particles, and the nasties are surrounded that, and they are collected out and disposed of in a safe way.
Can you wrap it up, and then no doubt people will ask you some questions on that?
Can I just mention one thing? There are no breeze blocks being manufactured on site. All the ash will go into sealed silos and will disappear off in sealed powder wagons. So I think somebody had the idea that we were going to be having a lot of people manufacturing on site.
Thank you. I think Councillor Hodges wanted to ask a question because it may be better answered by you. And Councillor Williams. Hold on, I'll take the names down as we go along. You go, fire ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know about better, just a different perspective, I should imagine. Can I ask two questions? Can you guarantee the quality of the waste wood? And do you have a customer for your ash?
So the way in which waste wood is prepared and manufactured is that waste aggregators gather in wood of different grades, A's, B's and C's for our purpose, as you're aware. And because they are obliged to deliver to the plant within a very tight specification, that means that we can meet the emissions requirements in due course, they will blend it before it comes to site to make sure that they are not themselves going to be breaching their contracts with us. And putting us in a position that we can not only sue them for damages but also reject the feedstock. That is the way that it works, and so there is a large degree of control in that sense. So that was the first one. In terms of the ash, ash, I think the main thing that you're probably concerned about, correct me if I'm wrong, is the hazardous ash. But I can comment on both. But as far as the hazardous ash is concerned, the fly ash is concerned, that has to be disposed of in one of currently two types of way. One is in a regulated landfill, and the other is newer generation facilities that actually convert fly ash into aggregates, which can actually then be used in the building sector. There's quite a lot of investment going on at the present point in time creating these new facilities, and of course we wouldn't be generating ash for another 2 to 3 years. So at that point in time, in fact obviously ahead of that point in time, the precise and the best place for us to dispose of this will become clear. I would imagine that the facilities that are closest to the, I say here in Barry, will probably make more sense because it's less far to go, and the additional cost of trucking it around will be lower.
Okay. Councillor Franks.
Thank you. Could one of the witnesses indicate why they think this site is appropriate, as we're, from what I can see, far away from the source of wood? And secondly, unless I misheard, I thought reference to £20 million for the council. I don't understand that at all. Perhaps that could be clarified.
I'll answer the second of those, which is the clarification. As you can imagine, for a complicated thing like this, we have to create a financial model, and the people who are funding it, who are one of the largest pension funds in the country, probably, I would imagine, at least half the people in this room, if you have pensions, it'll be some way, shape or form with them. They will not invest £50 million in this power plant unless they are absolutely convinced, based on that financial model, that these matters are absolutely, completely and utterly pinned down. Now, within that financial model, there are a number of different expenditures going out every year, one of which is business rates. Okay, comes to the council. The second will be obviously salaries to the employed personnel. and the third will be rentals to the Associated British Ports as the landlord. Together, that last time I checked it, I think it was about £21.5 million. The second point.
Was that? Why do we think this is a good place? Yeah. Well, we concluded that Barry was the port of Barry was an excellent place for lots of reasons. Basically, it's a good collection area for feedstock. There is, compared to other regions in the country, there is more feedstock availability in the South Wales region and the South West. It's a good area for employment of people to build the station. About 100 people will be engaged on this project in the construction phase, and just next door to the plant there is a highly qualified firm called Harris Pye, a few doors up, and they're on the tender list as one of the prospective constructors there. South Wales in general is a good area for construction because of the petrochem activities and the process industry and the power plants, some of which I've personally been involved in.
Can I just add that the other, for me at least, one of the big selling points is that in Barry Docks it gives us versatility in terms of where we actually source the feedstock from. So it's possible to bring it in by barge, for example, and not necessarily all by road. And that certainly, we do have another plant in Barrow where exactly that is going to be happening.
Okay, could I just ask a quick question, because it was Councillor Hodges who raised it, but he never asked you the question about the bottom ash going into be recycled.
Well, I asked
Yeah.
Chairman if you had a customer.
Yeah.
Because that would obviously affect how it goes, and he told me that it was going to be buried effectively.
No.
So they found
Yeah.
a customer.
It's about the recycling. That's what he mentioned the first time, wasn't it? Yeah.
He's quite right. I did omit to respond on that. Now, what we do for each of the projects is that we have a long-term contract, feedstock management contract, and ash disposal contract. It's a combined thing, lasts for 25 years, and that is with a waste aggregator that specialises in recycling. They have recycling centres at multiple locations around the country. And they certainly take bottom ash, as you're calling it, non-hazardous ash, is what really we're referring to, and they do convert it into useful sources. So they will be taking that away and processing it in that way for their resale market, I suppose. Whereas the hazardous ash, that cannot be treated in that way unless it goes to a specialist plant and is converted into aggregates.
Thank you. I know Councillor Williams had his hand up, and then I'll take you.
Thank you. I am qualified in this area. We kept mentioning Aberthaw. It wasn't the stack there that was causing the problems when we were involved 15 years ago. It was basically that the bags of cement were put over an optic, and then the optic cut off the cement, raw cement that was coming through. The bag was moved on, and then you put another bag on, and the optic opened, and you moved this. And to get a better bonus, the men had actually taken that optic off. So when they were moving the bags along like that, you were getting raw hot cement going into the air. So that was the main thing. It wasn't the flue there. But what does concern me there now, what control are you going to have on the wood that you're burning? Because if you're going to be burning wood that had creosote on it, and you say it's waste wood, you've got no control where this is coming from. If you've got lots of wood that are painted with different leads, etc., this is coming out into the chimney. Now, you've got the Ringelmann test that'll test your darkness of your smoke that comes up the stack. But when you're looking at wood, that shouldn't apply, because you don't get such a dark smoke. So the control you've got under the Health and Act there of 71 is really this blackness of the smoke. But as I say, Dow Corning had a white smoke that wasn't covered under the Act, and if you're going to burn this. But that's my main concern, is that if you're just having a pile of waste wood there, it could have creosote or it could have lead products which would come out into the, into the flue.
continue to make us collect. And
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so there's two questions there. I think Richard might want to comment on the smoke coming out of the stack comment, and I will comment on the arrangements and plans that are in place to strictly control the specification of the feedstock. Do you want to do that first?
Yeah. Well, it all starts with the feedstock basically. So we've got a design range of parameters that that make up the fuel specification in terms of the chemicals that are allowed to be in it, and for each one of those there is a design range basically, and it's tested at very regular intervals by ourselves in conjunction with Ofgem to make sure that the biogenic content is right, so that we get the renewable incentives, and that from our point of view that the fuel supplier is conforming with the specification. Now that deals with the fuel. We only put a fuel within a range of chemical compositions into the plant, basically. Now the plant is designed specifically to deal with anything that could come up with the impurities and paints, etc., within those ranges, and a little bit of a margin on either side. And at least half of the capital expenditure of the plant is associated with removing those dangerous substances and chemicals that would materialise through the process, basically. And so there's essentially a gasification chamber. The gasification is a very clean process. It's much cleaner than the incineration that we keep talking about in the room, because it avoids the temperature zones where the nasty chemicals are created, basically. So it's a rigorously controlled temperature in the furnace, if you like, where the gasification takes place, and then that is progressively, it's combustion, progressively, it's a syngas which is progressively combusted out in a very controlled way, maintaining an exact temperature such that you don't fall into these low temperature zones and the high temperature zones that create things like NOx and the furans and dioxins. Then the process passes through a conventional steam boiler, very conventional steam boiler, and some of the fine particles of ash fall out and are collected in sealed pipes and transported to the ash silo, and that's the non-hazardous bit. Further on, we've got it goes through a multi-clone process which takes out more of the larger particles, and that drops out, and that as well is non-hazardous and conveyed in a sealed way into the silos for hermetically sealed collection. And then we go into the scrubbing process, which is essentially spraying a bit of water into the flue gas stream, and various chemicals like hydrated lime and activated carbon, and those chemicals collect the pollutants essentially around the finer particles of ash, and then they are all collected in the bag filter. And they are big particles because they've gone through this process of a small particle along with a little bit of water and chemical additives. They are actually physically collecting around themselves the particles, and then they will be filtered by the bag filter. And so what goes up the stack is essentially water vapour and only the pollutants that are allowed by the law of the land to go up the stack.
Just to add to that, rigorous testing is a feature of all of the contracts that are put in place, and the funders insist on that anyway. And that applies both at the aggregators plant, where there's continuous chemical lab testing of all of the raw waste wood that is received, and then when it comes to the plant, again, there's continuous testing again of the feedstock in, and that is partly to ensure that we comply with the environmental permit. I think there are probably criminal sanctions if we don't do that, quite honestly, but also so that the plant remains in warranty, because it's only warranted to function within specification range. So everybody has a complete motivation to make sure that it's done properly.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
I say things have moved on since I qualified, so I understand what you're saying there. And of course the legislation is that should you break that law with any of that there, you can be immediately shut down.
Yeah, absolutely. One further point to make there, I think, is that the monitoring under the environmental permit restrictions, the monitoring it's electronically monitored about a third of the way up the stack by a unit called the SEMS unit, which detects all of the pollutants that National Resource and Wales will require us to, basically. That's a continuous process. It's probably every quarter of an hour we are monitored against our compliance with the emissions limits that have been set. And if we deviate from that for just half an hour, we will be subject to sanction by National Resources.
Councillor Parker? Can you turn your light off?
Really just some clarification on the bottom ash, which obviously quite a bit has been made of it. I mean, reading it, you're actually only producing 220 tonnes a year from what I can see here, which really means probably only one lorry a month is leaving, and as a percentage of the 72,000 you're burning, I'm trying to work out the figure, but it's 0.0025% or something like that. Can you just assist us and confirm that that might be true?
Yes, the actual percentage of ash that's produced by wood chip in our process is 8%, and I'm not a much smaller proportion of that is hazardous. I haven't got the exact. About a third of it is hazardous, and so it's not the one wagon a year, but it's not a significant amount compared to the wood chip tonnage that's coming in.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're expecting probably 2 wagon loads a week to go out, something of that order. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Hartree.
Moving away from the concerns expressed by other councillors, my concern as a ward member for Dinas Powys, which is only 4 miles away, is how often the lorries bringing it in are going to be on the road. It's a 7-day-a-week operation, and we've already suffering from the 2,000 houses already approved down the Barry waterfront. So if they were to take the Dinas Powys route, which has a couple of the busiest junctions in the Vale, I'm concerned how that would impact on the village.
Okay, I think Marcus Goldsworthy would answer that because it's
I would just ask the applicants, how many journeys do you expect to be taken each way every day? And what route? Is there a prescribed route, or would you vary the route? Thank you.
First thing is that compared to the original proposal, we are expecting fewer truck journeys. And we think that that will actually mean that we don't need to deliver on Sundays, which I'm sure is a benefit to the local community, and probably not on Saturdays either. Now what that means is that we'll have to manage the stock that's available on site so that we can deliver that amenity to the community. The trucks will take about 22 tonnes because they are new walking bed trucks which have that capacity, so we can have fewer trucks. I would estimate it about 15 a day. No, 15 trucks total.
Do you know,
truckloads, if that's
can I just ask you the question, because rather than people shout out, they'd like to know the route. I understand that it's conditioned. Would you prefer Marcus Goldsworthy to answer it?
I think Marcus can answer it. I think we've put something into the transport section of the submission with the application as well.
Okay, Marcus, would you answer that? The routine.
Well, the highways and access section of the report is page 447 of the committee report, and it details the deliveries. It also details the tonnage. It does say fuel will be expected to be delivered by road and sea. The indication is a net increase of 8 trips two-way, operating Monday to Friday, and the highway officer has raised no objections to that. A green travel plan was submitted with the previous application and approved at appeal, and a condition was attached to the permission require the developer to incorporate the measures set out in that green travel plan. That plan was to encourage alternative travel, facilitate alternative travel where possible, and sustainable travel. They have indicated these conditions can be applied to the revised development, although the travel plan was not submitted with this application. There is no indication actually as part of this report which routes or highway routes the lorries would be coming from. But I think it's important to note that that issue was raised in the previous appeal, and the inspector didn't ask for information about that or felt that it wasn't necessary to ask. What the inspector did say on traffic is that the transport assessment submitted by the applicant and accepted by the Highway Authority records 469 HGV movements on Cardiff Road each day. The Highway Authority has satisfied the road network has the capacity to accommodate the proposed new development, and no technical evidence is submitted, which leads me to a different view. With this regard, the impact of these additional movements, these are the additional movements generated by the plant, the amount generated in this process in comparison with the existing local and industrial traffic on the network is not considered to be great, and in this respect are not considered to be any substantive reasons to object to the proposal on the grounds there would be an unacceptable increase in noise or activities from lorry movements, because the site is located in an industrial area and where such activities are not uncommon. So the inspector didn't in 2010 feel it necessary to ask for details of which routes the lorries would be taking to access the site. We have not suggested a condition along that line because obviously we're taking account of that previous decision.
Yeah, I think, Marcus, to alleviate it, could we strengthen that condition where we ask for the lorry movements to come down the Barry Dock Link Road along Cardiff Way and Ford Millennium? Yeah. Yeah. Can you put your microphone on?
That was 2010. Can you? So I asked somebody what was the date of the approval of the waterfront development, 2,000 houses, because that is affecting Dinas Powys.
Well, that's got nothing to do with this planning application. So no.
I think it's clear that these are very limited lorry movements associated with this business.
There's 15 movements a day.
Nothing like what you're talking about for construction. I think it's also pertinent to point out that the type of deliveries are unlikely to come through Dinas Powys. That being said, we could put a condition on. What I would add a health warning on is that those conditions are notoriously difficult to enforce. Once you're on the public highway, you are on the public highway. Lorries can travel anywhere they want. So to actually enforce a condition requiring lorries not travel through Dinas Powys, for example, or travel a particular way, as we found with the waterfront development, is almost impossible to enforce, and I think is considered to be outside the remit of the planning process. So I just add a note of caution in terms of wanting to do that.
Yeah. Yes. Did you want to come back on Marcus's answer?
I did.
Yes, okay.
Now, just briefly to say, and just to state the obvious, we really do want to have a positive relationship with the community, and so in terms of working out the routings with the feedstock suppliers, I think it would be madness on our part to route feedstock deliveries through sensitive areas. I am absolutely sure that there'll be consultation, informal consultation at the time, to make sure that routes do not annoy people. That's one of the reasons why we've looked at eliminating Sundays and probably Saturdays as well. So we are sensitive to that.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton.
Right, thank you, Chair. I take on board what Marcus has said in terms of difficulty enforcement, but that has never stopped me from doing my job and looking after my residents. So whether there's a difficulty enforcement doesn't really come into it. What disappoints me is the figures quoted go back to 2010, 2005. There's a lot more traffic within the area since then. And the other thing is, I take on board the number of lorries that will be going to and from the plant. We've also had information in terms of moisture content. So the actual number of lorries could be up or down depending on the moisture content. But no, it's unacceptable. I have continual complaints from residents with heavy lorries travelling at speed through residential areas. It's not acceptable. And if it's difficult to enforce, then we shouldn't detract from our responsibility. And if it goes ahead, there ought to be restrictions, and it ought to be along the dock road and along the link bypass. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, John Drysdale.
The report says that the generator building is sound attenuated. Can you tell me what that consists of and what is the reduction in sound level from inside to outside?
I haven't got the exact technical details with me, but essentially it's going to be a brick and concrete building, which will be specifically designed with noise attenuation in there to protect the environment from the noise of the turbine, which is, you know, that probably is the noisiest piece of equipment on the site, and it will be brought down to levels that at least compare with the noise assessments that have been done.
Okay, happy. I think, has everybody asked the officers, the two members who've come to speak to us, the witnesses, whether you want to ask any more questions? Otherwise, I'm going to ask the planning officer to come back on some of the points that have been raised on general planning matters. Okay? Thank you. Would you like to step down then? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I'll try and answer some of the questions that haven't already been answered by the members of the public and the applicants and their agents. I won't go into efficiency. That's been dealt with there, and is in any event largely irrelevant to the consideration of the planning application. Concerns about ill health and incinerators. It should be pointed out that the report, as part of the determination of the application, Public Health Wales were consulted on the application and have raised no objections. One concern that was raised by Public Health Wales was the possibility of this plant operating in conjunction with two other plants it referred to, one being a biomass plant in Dow Corning and one being actually a waste plant on the other side of the docks. And I think it is worth noting from my members that both of those plants now, one was withdrawn and never proceeded to the planning application stage, and the other is now time expired and couldn't be implemented. They would have to make another application to do so. So this application, considered on its own, was not objected to by Public Health Wales, and that was made clear. It's also clear to point out that this is not a waste incinerator. This is an application for a power plant. That has been clarified by Welsh Government in the letter today. They consider it to be an application for a power plant, not a waste facility. The other point, which I won't dwell on because obviously we've dealt with the issue of bottom ash and whether it's reused or not, but I would point out in respect of Aberthaw that Aberthaw is burning waste wood. Aberthaw is burning wood from the Forestry Commission and is burning wood from other sources, and the ash from Aberthaw is being used, and the bottom ash is being used and recycled and used in the construction industry. There is a plant within Aberthaw Power Station itself which does that. So it is possible to do it with wood products. They are doing it at this very moment. We've dealt with the sealed system. I will come on to Councillor Elmore's comments. In respect of the regeneration of the docks, it is clear that this is very much within the industrial part of the dock setting. It is not part of the docks which has been set aside for residential development. The inspector was fully aware of that when he made his decision in 2010 and referred to it clearly, and took a view at that time that he did not think it would affect it. I think there was reference to the objections of the users of the water, and that is noted, but it is clear also to note that there have been no objections this time or previously from the developers, And you would have thought that obviously in spending a lot of money in redeveloping the docks, they may have concerns if they thought it was going to be harmful, and they have not raised any objections. The LDP is not a material consideration yet. You've heard me say this on many different applications. The LDP is at its draft stage, and Welsh Government says cannot be yet considered as a document to be assessed as part of the planning application process. So any references in there are still premature. And I will come on to the point about proximity principle and about where the wood supply for the plant comes to. I'll conclude on that if I may. I just draw attention yet again to the comments of the inspector, where he points out that previously, when the appeal was being considered, the council did propose a condition requiring the fuel supply to come from local sources or be delivered by sea if not from local sources. The inspector advised that he was not persuaded of that argument, and that the cost of transportation will weigh towards the use of local materials. So he felt that the cost of actually transporting the will mean that they will have to supply locally, and that the condition wasn't necessary. He also went on to advise that Welsh Assembly's Energy Policy Statement of March 2010 promotes renewable energy use and the use of waste wood in generation of electricity to prevent negative impacts on the environment and food supply, food security. The statement recognises that by 2020, 50% of the biomass used to generate electricity will be imported. And he said, that is an acknowledgement, in my view, that waste used to generate electricity may need to come from outside the region. So that document is still a valid document, dated 2010, and that would still apply. So the fact the waste wood may have to come from outside the region is not a reason to recommend refusal.
Okay. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just start by...
Right. You think these things would be automatic, wouldn't you? Can I echo something that Councillor Elmore said, first of all, that I also see this as a fundamentally different scheme to the previous. I won't go through the size of the buildings and the size of the stack and everything else, although I just have. What it does say in here, of course, is about the wood. And my question is really, I've got a few. On page 422, under the consultations, firstly it's got Barry Town Council, which I think we should acknowledge, put a strong objection in. But I think also the environmental health brackets pollution, is that an arm of this council? Right, thank you. In there, on the top of 423, they made a recommendation that a condition is attached requiring quality control on the source material. I don't see anything within the conditions.
I have just explained that, but it would not be a matter we could enforce anyway. It's a matter for Natural Resources Wales, who would enforce it as part of the licensing agreement, because basically, if they burnt any of the material outside of the remit, then they would be shut down. So that is not a matter that the council would wish to enforce through the planning process, not least because the planning process would not be able to shut it down quickly enough.
No, I do appreciate that. It's just that I'm here in a planning committee, and I like to be assured on stuff that gets burnt in my county. Also, I mean, when we make recommendations over building houses, we seem to worry about what colour render and what colour tiles they've got. So I think this is pretty fundamental. Now, can I say as well, I've looked at the inspector's reports from the previous appeal, because I've been repeatedly told to, but I did anyway. They said that they had no effective problems with the route of the wood coming in, but then they didn't know what the route was anyway. So that seems strange, but now we're being told that this will all come out in the wash anyway. My problem with this is we seem to have a system that seems to be largely untested. We have a fuel stuff that we will have no control over. We have monitoring which will be done internally, but we have no control over. We just get told about it later. And we've got problems and issues with the route that we don't know about. I've got too many unanswered questions still, Chairman. And I'm just wondering if Marcus can help me a bit more with some of them.
If I deal with the monitoring first, you'll notice that our environmental health colleagues, as you rightly pointed to, made some recommendations, and one of those recommendations was in respect of the air quality assessment, and they asked, could we impose a condition requiring a further air quality assessment to be undertaken after the plant is in operation, so that essentially the statements made in the air quality assessment we've looked at here can be ratified. Now that I would equate to the same as we have done with wind turbines, where we have asked for noise assessments after the wind turbines are up to make sure that the noise generated by those turbines matches the noise reports that are submitted with them. And there is a condition which has been placed on there which will require the developers to undertake a new air quality assessment at various locations close to the site to ascertain that they are meeting their obligations set out in their submitted assessment. If they fail to do so, the condition requires them to cease operation. Now that essentially is a control that does go beyond what we would normally do. The developers have agreed that they feel they're happy with that. It's certainly beyond what the inspector did when he considered the application in 2010, and should give some surety that there will be tests undertaken after the plant, if it is built and is in operation, that there will be tests undertaken to make sure it is complying with the terms of its assessments submitted to justify it. Secondly, in respect of routes to the site, should members wish to add it, you'll note at condition 27 there is a requirement to submit a green travel plan, but that could be amended to include routes for the delivery of feedstocks to the development, and require those routes to be agreed prior to the development commencing. So there's no reason why we couldn't add that condition, that element to the condition. It would be dealt with by that condition as it stands, but that makes it more specific.
Yeah. Anything else, Nick?
Well, I would appreciate, if this is going to get passed, I would appreciate that, because the green travel plan, which will include, seems to be mostly going on about the staff car journeys, which I'm certainly far less concerned about than lorries. So I would appreciate that. But I would have thought that after all these years, 2008 and all that we would have had routes. Should this have been sorted out 7 years ago? Why are we still in the dark?
Okay. Howard, you wanted to ask a question?
Well,
hold on.
can I just...
Who did you say? Yes, it was. It was Councillor Penrose.
Yeah,
first.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's two issues here. One is really to query with Marcus. I've been on the planning committee 3 years, and I'm still confused by the LDP. We're having in last month's meeting, as far as my own ward of Sully, allotments that were turned down on the grounds that they were premature to the LDP. So we're enforcing the LDP in that ruling. And now we're being told the LDP isn't relative in this application. So I'm a little bit baffled. We seem to drop in and out of the LDP, UDPs, and perhaps Marcus could clarify a bit more detail why. The other one is after in excess of 40 years associated with the road haulage industry, I find it strange that travel plans can't be agreed if the applicant is serious about looking at the environment and the routes. It's been implemented numerous times, certainly with Aberthaw Power Station, certainly with Aberthaw Cement Works, with quarry supplies coming from inside and outside of the Vale. And it's easy because the actual applicant can insist that the tenders by the road haulage companies insist on those routes, and they cost accordingly, and their prices would be according to using the recognised. And I'm a little bit sharing Councillor Hodges' skepticism on this one, because I know over the years that going through Cardiff, going through the tunnels, Rover Way onto the A48 cuts out huge mileage for heavy goods operators. And I think a travel plan would be essential, and if they're going to be responsible, the applicants, they should insist on it on the haulage companies that implemented the supply and the removal of the ash.
Thank you. Anything to add, Marcus?
Obviously, in respect to the LDP, the picture is not clear. I can read out to you. You are aware every time every application comes before us, we have to run through this. I can read out to you the section of the Planning Policy Wales which spells out where we are with the LDP. In development management decisions, the weight to be attached to an emerging draft LDP will in general depend on the stage it has reached, but does not simply increase as the plan progresses towards adoption. When conducting the examination, the appointed inspector is required to consider the soundness of the whole plan in the context of national policy and other matters which are material to it. Consequently, policies could ultimately be amended or deleted from the plan, even though they may not have been subject of a representation at the deposit stage. Certainly regarding the content of the plan, it will only be achieved. Certainty regarding the content of the plan will only be achieved when the inspector publishes the binding report. Thus, it is considered the weight to give to specific policies in the LDP that apply, the emerging LDP that apply to a particular proposal, will need to be considered carefully with regard to underlying evidence and background to these policies. National planning policy is also a material consideration. So basically, what Welsh Government is saying is that the policies the documents which the documents which form the background to the LDP, all the consultations that have gone wrong standing with those, they are material, they are relevant and have to be considered. So, for example, sustainability assessments, commercial land assessments, housing assessments, they all have to be considered. However, the policies themselves carry little weight until the LDP has gone through the process of inspection by a appointed inspector. I'm not going to go through the issue of the allotments again. Obviously, we had a long and detailed discussions about that many times again. But what I would say is the only time that is put aside is where there is a possibility that the change that's being considered could have an issue and run to the heart of the LDP, i.e. it's premature to consider. And that is what happened in the case of the allotments. That is not what would happen here. Clearly, the use that's proposed sits within the terms of both the Unitary Development Plan and would sit within the terms of the LDP in the future.
Okay.
As I say, we could put a condition, and I'm quite happy for that condition to be amended to take account of that.
Okay. Condition accepted,
27.
yes. Councillor Hamilton. Sorry?
I'm sick of having to phone up planning with regards to heavy transport going through residential areas. Can we have clarification of the proposed route? And, you know, would it, if it gets passed, will it actually be part of the application? Thank you.
The route would be subject of submissions as part of the condition and would be agreed as part of that, and then would have to be enforced. That is how the route which dealt with the routes which were agreed for the waterfront were dealt with, was subject of submissions. You couldn't, in all honesty, set a route out now because all sorts of issues can happen in the meantime. This might not be built for 3-4 years. In that case, there might be a difference in road layouts, there might be a change in the way, and you have to build that into the condition. So there would be a condition. We would require details to be agreed before development commenced. We'd require them to comply with that in terms of delivery of feedstocks and removal of ash from the site.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor John Drysdale and then Councillor Andrew Parker. And Pam Drake.
I have one small question and then I'd like to just give my comments, if you like, on the application as a whole. But on page 423, there's a section about odour, and it says there should be no odour from the plant as it works on negative pressure. As that's our report, I'm asking Marcus rather than the developers, what does that mean, please?
As I understand it, what it means is that the plant, when it's operating, the pressure inside is such that any odour and smells will be kept within the plant. Now, that is something which has been, information has been given to us both by the developer and agreed by environmental health colleagues. So I am a planning officer, I am not a chemist or a an environmental health officer. So I can't give you any other comment other than that. That report that's been put in there because that has been clarified by our environmental health colleagues.
Okay. General comment then?
Yes, Chair. As I said to several of the residents at the site visit this morning, I'm really not happy with this application, this location, because, you know, yeah, it's an industrial area, but industries come in grades of heavy dutiness, and this is at the upper end, and it's sandwiched between two residential areas, and I do have concerns about emissions and safety. However, having said that, I just don't think we've got much choice within the terms of planning policy but to approve it. And I say that because it's a B2 use on the land. This is a B2 use, so the principle of the development going there, we can't oppose that. The emissions I'm concerned about, I'm told that actually that's not something we can deal with because the NRW will give the permit and therefore it's not a consideration for us. And similarly on safety, it's the Health and Safety Executive and NRW. As far as some of the other concerns of residents and issues in the report, I hope that residents will actually be pleasantly surprised on the issues of transport, which is actually quite a small number of lorry journeys per hour. On the issue of noise, it seems that that is controllable, and if it isn't controlled, then we can do something about it. The ash is in this enclosed system. It's not as if it's going to be shipped out on the back of a lorry with a loose tarpaulin over the back. So I think many of the other issues I'm okay with, but we can only look back at the planning inspector's report from 2010, and the central issue in that he criticised the council for is that we were not able to provide evidence to back up the reasons we gave for refusing the application at that time. And unfortunately, we're in the same position again, because our own officers, the public health people, NRW, are saying this will be okay, it's controllable. You know, I accept that probably 99% of the time the emissions that I'm concerned about will be within the limits and within spec. What concerns me is that engineers always believe that what they've designed is going to work perfectly, and of course it never does. And what concerns me is what happens if we do have a glitch and emissions are coming out, and what happens in terms of public health and perhaps having to evacuate people and so on. However, that is not an issue apparently that we can consider. So I think it's unfortunate, but I don't think we've got much choice if we're going to be credible and responsible in terms of planning policy.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Parker.
Yes, dealing with this condition on the routes, obviously it's quite a long lifespan for this. Now, a discharge of condition might change if, for example, 5 Mile Lane came into action, the improvement on there. How would you deal with the changing traffic patterns over a 50-year cycle or whatever the life of the plant is?
When a condition is obviously requires details to be submitted, that doesn't mean that once they've submitted those details and they are agreed, you can submit further details as long as the Highway Authority were to agree them, or we as authority were to agree them. They could be amended in due course. So there is no reason to actually, you wouldn't have to apply to vary the condition, you just have to submit further details, which would have to be agreed obviously by the relevant authority.
Okay, are we all about done? Oh yes, Pam, the local member.
I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has said, but I totally agree with what my colleague, Councillor Elmore, said. I have concerns with this plant, as I did in 2010. I had very little scientific knowledge. I went to an all-girls school, and there was 40 girls in our class, and when it came to the science lesson, we had one Bunsen burner, so chemistry was not high on our agenda. But I do note the change in the process they'll be operating, and I have to rely on what I've read. The stack acts as an exhaust and will have no visible air emissions, as particulates will be controlled with the abatement equipment. This seems to suggest, and I have to take their word for it, that there should be no problems with air quality that could damage health. I know technology has moved on considerably in the last number of years, but mistakes have been made in the past and people have suffered consequences and are still suffering. I note in the officer's recommendations on page 461, and I hope I've got this correct, that an AQA will be carried out in certain areas within 6 months of the plant becoming operational and to be submitted within 3 months of its commencement. Is that normal practice with such new plants as this?
It is certainly something that we would ask for. This is not, I mean, plants like this are few and far between. The inspector didn't ask for it when he considered the plant, but as I pointed out, we have, in similar cases, when I say similar, in cases where we are concerned that reports have been put in to justify a scheme, we have required those reports to be updated after the implementation of the scheme to ensure that the developers are complying with the terms of it. So I used the example of a wind turbine, a number of wind turbines where we've done this. We actually did it with and members may recall this, we had a site visit, we did it with lighting in respect of Barry Rugby Club, when they put a report in indicating that lighting would not affect the neighbours. We asked once it's erected, the report was submitted to satisfy us that that was happening. So it is not an uncommon technique used. Obviously this is a fairly uncommon planning application, but what's been asked for here is not unusual.
Okay. Councillor Hodges.
Can I just say thank you for that, Marcus. Despite all what I've read and the assurance given, I'm not convinced that this is a suitable plant to be sited close to our residents in this area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if Councillor Drysdale was moving officer's recommendation or not, but for the avoidance of doubt, can I move refusal?
Okay. And seconded. Can you give us reasons?
I'd like to give you... I think we've had the reasons come out through the debates, Chairman. If, however, I'm unsuccessful, then I don't think you need them at this time. I don't think that's unreasonable. But I tell you what as well, if it does go through, if my refusal is refused, I'd like to obviously amend 27 or add another one to actually tie down timescales of a route prior to operation, etc., etc.
Thank you. Did you move officer's recommendation?
I didn't move it, but I would be quite happy to move it with the amendment that's been discussed about creating a travel routing.
Right.
For incoming and outgoing lorry.
Have you got a seconder? Thank you. Okay then. It's been moved and seconded for this to be turned down by Councillor Hodges and seconded by Councillor Val Hartree. So those in favour of refusal, please show. Five. Okay.
I'm not voting. I'll tell you.
Those against that refusal, please show. Mm. 12. And the abstentions? 1 abstention. Okay. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Thank you. Those against? Okay, and it's carried. Thank you for that.
Chair, can I quickly...
Yeah.
Chair, can I quickly ask...
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, okay.
Chair,
then.
can I just confirm we will be amending the condition 27 to take account of traffic routes as part of that authorisation?
Right,
agreement.
okay. Yeah, we will adjourn. The next application I'm going to call before you will be Ardwin. Okay, and then that'll release the witnesses for